Hey everyone, it's Kong again, and here's another episode of Should You Summon. As always, I'm going to be presenting high-level overviews, using these 4 criteria to help you decide whether this banner is worth your hard-earned vouchers and crystals. How these characters fit into your team, whether they unlock any bonds, what kind of content they get used for, and their future availability. So let's jump right into this Destiny banner featuring Elwin, Leon, and Bernhardt, running from July 23rd to August 5th. As a Destiny banner, your first SSR is guaranteed to be one of these 3 characters that you don't already have. After your first SSR pull, this reverts to a normal raid-up banner. Do you have deja vu yet? I actually already have a video for this exact same banner when it came out a few months ago. But of course we do have some new information and some new content since then, so I did want to re-record this to make sure everything's up to date. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with Elwin. Elwin is a self-sustaining DPS unit with sadly low mobility. His talent boosts his damage dealt, and also heals him by 30% of his damage dealt, but this heal only triggers 100% of the time if he's at 6 star, so he does want some investment. His unique equipment is a sword that has a built-in clock effect, giving him a chance of resetting some of his big damage attacks cooldowns. There's no 3-cost skill on the horizon for him yet, at least at the time that I recorded this episode, and many players are hoping that when it does come, it'll help shore up his mobility problems somehow. He's a member of Empire's Honor, buffed by Bernhardt, Leon, and Lance, Legion of Glory, buffed by Ledin, Elwin, and Grenier, and Protagonists, buffed by Matthew. So he does carry one of the faction buffs for Legion of Glory. His boosts your damage dealt by 15% if you have more than 80% hit points. For bonds, he unlocks the defensive bond for Hein, and the attack bonds for Lana, Ledin, Leon, and Leanna. Of course, the attack bond for Ledin isn't super essential, but the other ones really kinda want it. For his own bonds, he needs Hein for his defensive bond and Leanna for his attack bond. For content, he's on faction for Phoenix, Scylla, and Valkyrie in the Eternal Temple, and he's actually quite useful for all 3 of them. In Ancient Beckoning, by contrast, he's on faction for Sleipnir and Hugin and Munin, but he's not necessarily among the best picks for those. He does absolutely shine against the Thunder Dragon because of his ability to clear buffs with Roar and Sword Soul and heal himself indefinitely. At higher levels, he can effectively solo the Thunder Dragon. In PvP, he's no longer a top-tier choice, but he does remain solid in his Lancer class to counter Cavalry Landius. Even there are other characters who do this better than him. He's got very short legs and needs a lot of help, so it can be tricky to give him everything he needs to get the job done. Still, he's a great transitional choice for players who have built him up for PvE and want to start getting into PvP. For availability, Elwin's apparently stuck on this banner with his enemies. The next time he comes up in the schedule is on this same Destiny banner with Leon and Bernhardt in early December. Now let's move on to Leon. Leon is a highly mobile cavalry DPS unit and one of the overall most useful off-the-shelf attacking units in the game. He does have a 3-cost skill and unique equipment now, so what you see is basically what you get. His unique armor gives you the ability to ignore terrain penalties for a turn after taking damage, effectively unshackling him from his previous over-reliance on Altamuller's faction buff. He's a member of Empire's Honor, buffed by Bernhardt, Leon, and Lance, and Strategic Masters, buffed by Altamuller and Lanford. So he does have a faction buff for Empire's Honor. This one increases damage dealt by 5% for each tile moved before combat, up to a maximum of 15%. It's usually not worth bringing over his Selfish Chivalry self-buff in PvE content, but there's a new use case for it in PvP, which I'll get to in a moment. For bonds, he unlocks the defensive bonds for Bernhardt and Lana, and the attack bonds for Laird and Roga. For his own bonds, he needs Laird for his defensive bond, and Elwin for his attack bond. Fortunately, Elwin is also on this banner. For content, in PvE he's useful for pretty much all general run-of-the-mill content. Story, time rifts, joint battles, challenges, and so on. He is on faction for Phoenix and Valkyrie in the Eternal Temple, and Sleipnir in Ancient Beckoning, and he's a meta pick for all 3. He's also incredibly useful against the dark, fire, and even thunder dragons. If you need to hit something hard, Leon will hit it hard. Maybe not a Lancer with phalanx, I guess. In PvP, he's had an on-again, off-again relationship with Apex Arena. He's seeing a bit of a resurgence at the moment because of his disruptive 3-cost skill, which can move enemies within one ring out of position and set you up for a nice follow-up attack. If you want to sacrifice some of his pure attack power to give him a balanced blade, you can extend the range of this disruptive scramble and give yourself a little more flexibility to select specific targets. Finally, with the launch of Empire Faction Mate and General Destructive Force Ares, Leon has started carrying his faction buff more and more to help make Ares even more of a wrecking ball. I do have to apologize. My original plan was to have another special guest come on and do this Leon section, but unfortunately, because he's incredibly busy with work right now, he wasn't able to do the entire Should You Summon section for Leon, but he was able to send along this short message. So...
I'm Nitro, and as a longtime user of Leon, I endorse this video.
Thanks very much for your support, Nitro. I'm going to start using that voice clip after everything I say to give myself legitimacy. For availability, as with Elwin, Leon's next appearance in the schedule is on this same banner when it returns in early December. Okay, now let's look at Bernhardt. Bernhardt, Emperor of the Rhaegar Empire, is a kind of general-purpose character. He's got some attack power, some tanking abilities, some AoE, some fixed damage, and some support. His underrated talent comes with an aura that reduces nearby enemies' attack and defense by up to 15%, no questions asked. This is an amazing talent that scales up nicely with higher-end content. He does have a piece of unique body armor coming to the global servers in August that extends his talent's span by 1, which opens up a lot of positioning options for you. He's a member of Empire's Honor, buffed by Bernhardt, Leon, and Lance, Dark Reincarnation, buffed by Bozel and Licorice, and Mythical Realm, buffed by Gizroth and the Tree Sage. In a continuing theme on this banner, Bernhardt also carries his own faction buff, which grants plus 20% damage if you have class advantage over your opponent. For bonds, he unlocks the attack bonds for Imelda and Vargas. And for his own bonds, he needs Leon for his defensive bond and Bozel for his attack bond. Thankfully, again, Leon is on this very banner. For content, in PvE, he's on faction for Valkyrie and Leviar in Eternal Temple, but he's really only useful for the former. He's also on faction for Fenrir and Sleipnir in Ancient Beckoning, and his ability to reduce the super boss's stats with his aura makes him essential here. The combination of his talent aura and the innate debuffing and buff stripping in his hegemony skill of course makes him excellent against the Thunder Dragon as well. In PvP, he was once a solid pick for Apex Arena because his versatile skills gave you some options with how to play your box. He may still see some utility with a Balance Blade and Sword Dance in preventing enemy healing, but by and large, it's harder and harder to fit him into a box these days. For availability, perhaps unsurprisingly, Bernhardt's next appearance on the schedule is on the repeat of this banner with Elwin and Leon, coming in early December. So here's the quick and dirty. Elwin is a self-sustaining DPS with short legs. He has a faction buff for Legion of Glory, and he unlocks the defensive bond for Hein and the attack bonds for Lana, Ledin, Leon, and Lyanna. Leon is a heavy-hitting, high-mobility DPS. He has a faction buff for Empire's Honor, and he unlocks the defensive bonds for Bernhardt and Lana, and the attack bonds for Laird and Roga. And Bernhardt is a versatile unit with an excellent debuffing aura. He has the other faction buff for Empire's Honor, and he unlocks the attack bonds for Imelda and Vargas. This banner used to be a highly recommended summon, but I should mention that with the plethora of new characters that have been added to the game over the past several months, none of them is 100% essential. There are a lot of options for clearing PvE content, and there are much better PvP characters. Still, these characters are ready-made to do specific things for you. So if you're missing any of them and you don't mind spending some vital resources with characters like Licorice and Reen still on the immediate horizon, then feel free to dive in. And speaking of which, here's a reminder about upcoming banners. Next week, this banner will overlap with the launch of the new characters Licorice and Renata from Langrisser Reincarnation Tensei. Licorice is getting some low-key hype as a new Dark Faction buffer and pseudo-healer who can cause some nasty terrain effects. So you might be interested in holding off until you see how you do on that one before you invest vouchers here. When this banner goes away, it'll be replaced by a raid-up banner featuring Emilia and Akaya. Akaya's unique equipment was recently data mined and should be coming to global servers in December, so if you wanted to get a head start on her, then this may be your chance. The next must-pull character for PvP is Reen on the Trails of Cold Steel crossover coming in late August. That's 5 weeks after the launch of this Elwin, Leon, and Bernhardt banner, if you'd like to start planning ahead. In my own box, I've intentionally left all 3 of these gents at 5-star in case any of them shows up as an off-banner pity breaker for me, which, actually, Bernhardt has done multiple times. So I may restlessly fire 1 or 2 multis at it and just carry the pity forward to Licorice if I don't get surprised by one of them. Let me know in the comments if you're planning on summoning, or if you're planning on saving up instead. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next Should You Summon.